Hello, and thank you for tuning in to ClariT Media, ClariT Conversations, and the Bay Area Mental Health Hour. This is Alicia Mayo, the founder and executive producer of ClariT Media, inviting all of you out there to please subscribe to ClariT Media and the Bay Area Mental Health Hour on YouTube, and look for us on Instagram as well as on Facebook. You can either find ClariT Conversations, the Bay Area Mental Health Hour, ClariT Media, or me, Alicia Mayo, on all of those platforms that you use, okay? And thank you again for your support, your subscriptions, your likes, your follows, all of that. If any of you out there have businesses and you're interested in advertising your business, products, or services, reach out to me. I have really affordable rates that I can quote you, and you can get your business elevated through the ClariT Media platform. Thank you again all for tuning in to the programming. I hope you're enjoying it. If you have any questions or comments, reach out to me again at aliciamayo430@gmail, or you can drop me a message on my cell phone at 707-430-8355. Yeah, I gave you my personal contact. It's okay, because I care about you like that. Yeah. Anyway, I hope you enjoy this programming of ClariT Media, Black, woman-owned, nonprofit media.
What is being evaluated is the incumbency of Donald Trump. This election is a referendum on the past 4 years. And that's always the case when you have a second term seeking incumbent. And so he has a record now. He's not the insurgent outsider who can talk about the Democrats. I'm stunned as a student of campaigns that this man is actually running the identical campaign that he ran in 2020. And his followers stupidly don't seem to require him to have evolved or grown or to have delivered. He hasn't delivered on the wall. And when George Bush said, read my lips, no new taxes, and raise taxes, it was the end of his career. But somehow Donald Trump has failed on the number one issue, the wall, and Biden hasn't mentioned it. Kamala hasn't mentioned it to remind everybody. This fool emerged talking about a wall that has not been built. And now you're talking about following his advice on a pandemic. So again, to me, America is at a point where the center is still holding, but the boundaries are being stretched as far as they can. And that's why Nancy Pelosi has resorted to talking about the 25th Amendment. And let me break down the 25th Amendment. The 25th Amendment has 5 sections. Section 1 explains that the vice president becomes a president of the United States when the president is incapacitated permanently or dead, permanently. That's the only part of that entire amendment that discusses replacing the president. The next 4 sections all discuss the vice president's role and the Speaker of the House's role in identifying the president's medical status as incapacitated. Now, they, again, would have to be getting informed by doctors. I guess they would assume the frame is understood that doctors would inform these politicians, but the president pro tempore, who is Chuck Grassley, and Nancy Pelosi would simply have to have a letter sent to them by Pence. Pence would say the president is incapacitated. So in this text, the 25th Amendment, the president can do it himself and write Pence and say to Pence, I can't do this work right now. I need you to do the work until I get better. And then Pence would be acting president, but not president. He would have presidential authority, but he would not be president. Donald Trump would be president, but he would be sidelined. That's one way. And then Donald Trump, when he got better, let's say with COVID, and he would, if he came out of it, he could then he would have to write Mike Pence and say, I'm better now, thanks for holding the job. No, and it's over. That's one way. So the president can do it. The second way is the vice president can do it himself. He was simply initiated by getting a majority of the existing cabinets for the executive offices of the executive branch. So this would be the FBI, CIA, Department of Homeland Security, anything related to health, the Centers for Disease Control, EPA, FDA, the Chief of Staff, the Secretary of Defense, all of the President's cabinet, the majority, not all, the majority of the cabinet and the VP would write Grassley, the President pro tempore, and Nancy Pelosi, and then they would, all of them agree that the president can't do the job right now, and therefore the president would be stripped of the power of president temporarily. He's still president, he just doesn't have the power to command war, to command the armies, to do anything, but he's still president on paper. But Pence would be the acting president in that second scenario also. The third scenario is where Nancy Pelosi would simply write a letter to herself and to Chuck Grassley and say the president is incapacitated, and they could record, if they agree, then Donald Trump would be considered incapacitated and would not be allowed to act as president. But in all of those scenarios, and this is important for the audience, nowhere in the 25th Amendment does it account for removing the president. It's not about removal. It's about he's sick, he needs help, he needs time to get better. That's what the 25th Amendment is for. So it's not like impeachment, where it is no provision in the 25th Amendment that even discusses, it doesn't even come up, the removal of the president. It's talking about if after JFK, after Spiro Agnew in the 1970s, the vice president had to resign because of tax evasion, and then the president had to resign because of corruption with Watergate. That crisis there created the 25th Amendment, as well as the murder of JFK, and just the concern about fixing the stipulations of the succession of power. So with Trump having COVID, right, let's assume it's way worse than it is, and I think it's way worse, and I think we're in for a shocker with Trump, with COVID soon, because he's living like he don't got it. And we know people like that who walk around with pneumonia thinking they can beat it, and then all of a sudden we at their funeral. Let me explain something to the audience that you're not going to find out anywhere else unless you Google it. One, Donald Trump's granddaddy, Fred, died of Spanish flu in 1918 in the pandemic. So the man that brought the Trump family to America from Germany before they got kicked out of Germany, because they did get kicked out of Germany, the Trumps did, their grandfather, Fred, if you look it up, died of the 1918 Spanish flu. This man has a family history, even though I know that doesn't count in this way like heart disease does. He's got family history. And this man has no sensitivity to a pandemic when his patriarchal ancestor died this way. His daddy's daddy. His daddy's daddy died this way. But then there was another president who was a great racist openly, who had the Supreme Court, members of Congress all come together at the White House to watch W.D. Griffith's Birth of a Nation and celebrated it as history with lightning. The racist Woodrow Wilson. Woodrow Wilson and Donald Trump did the exact same thing. When the Spanish flu hit in 1918, Woodrow Wilson played it off just like Trump. Trump did nothing, Woodrow Wilson did nothing. And guess what happens? In April of 1919, Woodrow Wilson contracts the Spanish flu just like Donald Trump has COVID. Most people don't know this. Woodrow Wilson
history repeating
had, from the moment he got it in April 1919 until October 1919, he was sick for 6 months, acting like he was fine. In October of 1919, Woodrow Wilson, the racist, has a stroke. And he's permanently incapacitated for the rest of his life, dies 3 years later. The last 17 months of his life in office, his wife, Edith Wilson, look it up for yourself. I'm a political scientist professor at the top level. I ain't playing games. Edith Wilson ran America for 17 months. Look it up. You want to know if a woman ever been president? Yeah, her name was Edith Wilson. Woodrow Wilson's second wife, his first wife died the first term. He married the second woman in the beginning of the second term, and then he had this stroke after contracting his Spanish flu. And he, just like Trump, lived out loud, acted like it wasn't no big deal, had a re-election, and then he ended up dying within 3 years. You think Donald Trump is done with COVID because he's trying to win a re-election and trying to show people, wow, look, COVID's not so bad. And then there's 200,000 people multiplied by how many people everybody know. I don't know how many people y'all know. Let's
Right.
assume everybody know 10 people. So multiply 10 times 200,000.
That's right.
Think
Unreported.
about
Right.
all the people who are hurting behind
Right.
that 200. If that 200,000 is the nucleus, think of
Right.
all of the outer rings of impacts that it's had on
Yeah.
all of, and then you think about the rates of death across the world, up in Canada, down in Mexico, places that are contiguous to America aren't even suffering like America. Other parts of this land, north and south of America's continent, aren't suffering like America. Latin America is not suffering. Africa is not suffering like America. Think about that. Africa is doing better than America with the COVID response. The African leaders have been better than Donald Trump. Now I don't know. Almost every response in the world has been better than Donald Trump's. Nobody has been worse than this. But this man is telling people this is great, and he keeps projecting, oh, it would have been 2 million, trying to play a game with people trying to project out that he's doing a great job, and he's actually saved 1.9 million American lives, is what he's really suggesting, rather than realizing that we are a fifth of the world's dead.
So you talked about Nancy Pelosi and the 25th Amendment at the beginning. Let's tie it together here. What you're saying is Nancy Pelosi has brought up the 25th Amendment because there is a concern now about his health, and they're about to do what about it?
There's nothing they can do about Trump, but Nancy Pelosi is initiating a process already for the next president. I've been telling my students, because I'm teaching a class right now called Presidential Politics, and I told my students all semester, because of Trump's excesses, Congress will fix a lot of different things that the Trump presidency has exposed, like the relationship of the Attorney General to the White House. Let's be clear. Congress created the Attorney General. Congress created the attorney. Let me say it again. Congress created the Attorney General's office. Congress created the courts of America, except the Supreme Court. Congress created the whole legal system of America. The Attorney General is not ahead of the American legal system. Congress is ahead of the American legal system. They made his office. They made the FBI. They made J. Edgar Hoover's office. Congress has all the power in America that is to be had. Congress has war power like the president has. The president doesn't have certain powers that Congress has. The president can't impeach Congress. Congress can impeach the president. Congress has all the power the president has, and then some. Congress is boss. The president has evolved to become more important over time. But if you read the best books on political science about the American presidency, they will tell you the president ain't nothing but a clerk. The best book, the most famous book in political science on the American presidency by Richard Neustadt says that the president ain't nothing but a clerk. And the job has evolved because of modernization, industrialization, urbanization, and then the nuclear technology that, of course, because of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, made the president way more important because of the nuclear capacity to destroy the planet. Yeah, so now the president is there. But be clear, Nancy Pelosi is doing what Congress has always done, which is why I was able to tell my students 3 months ago, when Trump is done, you're going to see the presidency be changed in a dramatic way in terms of how it can conduct itself. Independent of Trump, they cannot touch Trump with this. What she's doing today is after Trump, and that's typical. They normally will make the law in light of the abuse they see and say, this new law is in relationship to this fool, but it doesn't pertain to this fool because we can't be retroactive. And so it's for Trump. It's possible, but it's not directed at him. So it can't touch Trump. But the next president will have to reveal their medical records. And what she's creating is the ability of Congress, and she has the power. Google the 25th Amendment and read it. You'll see Nancy has all the power. As the Speaker of the House, she has the power to create a mechanism that actually oversees this process, that oversees the health of the president. She can require, Nancy can, all presidents from now on to show their taxes. He can require from now on presidents to have medical exams made public, randomly. That's the position she's in. Nancy Pelosi has so much power, I can't explain it to you how much power she has. She's the
Okay.
most powerful woman on the planet. And
Thank you for that education. I
yeah,
mean, that's a lot of information, but a lot of
yeah.
very important, powerful information for us. So thank you so much for being here, Professor James Taylor of the University of San Francisco, political scientist. That's why I have you here, because you're giving us all of the information, including the history, and bringing it all forward to today, tying it all together for us. Thank you so much for that.
But let me just wrap up one more point in the last point. And
Okay.
if I didn't already, want to reiterate that the
Okay.
25th Amendment has no provision for the removal of the president. It is not about removal. It's about taking care of the president when he's or she is hurt or under duress or mentally incapacitated, and then transferring that power temporarily to the vice president. Again, it can happen three ways. The president can do it, the VP can do it with the majority of the cabinet, or Nancy could do it by herself, by writing herself a letter, and the president pro tempore, who right now is, the Senate is Chuck Grassley. And then Donald Trump would effectively be in office without the power of the office, and that has zero to do, this is totally separate from the election. So if you want to then ask me a question, well, what does this mean for the election? That's a separate question, and the answer is that's only the Republican Party's problem. That's how you sort that out neatly.
Okay, so let's say we elect Biden Harris, Biden in his elderly state, in
Right.
his health
That's right.
state. Okay, so we can imagine Kamala
That's right.
becoming
That's right.
in charge. Okay.
You could have Kamala Harris be president in the next 4 years or 3 years, if
Okay.
Biden, or next year if Biden wins. And if you listen to the debate the other night with the vice presidents, they asked them, and both VP candidates would not answer the question, but they were asked, well, what if your guy is in his 70s? If he dies, he said, have you all discussed succession with the president, with your nominee? And they both said, they both played it down. But that's a real issue. Kamala is the only young person in this equation. I mean, actually, that's scary, because I was told the other day that Mike Pence is only like 3 or 4 years older than Kamala Harris. Now you look at that black Indian, Jamaican, you can call it what you want, whatever it is. It's holding up better than whatever that Indiana soup he drinking, eating is.
Okay. Well, hey, listen, we tell it like it is here on ClariT Media, and without apology. Okay, if you're offended in some way by any of the comments made by Professor James Taylor or by my smiles in response to his, then you need to change the channel. I'm sorry, but not sorry. Okay, so let's move on. Let's look at the projections and the findings in the key battleground states so far, okay, that will decide who wins the Electoral College, and that's still in place, unfortunately. How do voters in these key states see the race, and what issues are driving it?
Yeah, the issue is healthcare for everybody. That's why, in a normal election where you don't have to worry about a candidate talking about not succeeding and not accepting the results, is you normally could predict the outcome of this election and know know that Biden is probably going to win. All of the metrics say Biden. Trump is not even beating Trump from 2016. Trump has to outbeat Trump before he can beat Biden. He's not doing as well as the incumbent as he was as the challenger. So let's just ignore Hillary and ignore Biden. Just Trump. Trump's numbers in 16 are better than they are in 20. So Trump is not doing better than he did against himself. So the Trump of 2016 could not beat Biden. He beat Hillary, he could not beat Biden. And he's not even doing as well now, and he's still losing to Biden, right? So Trump is not doing as well in 2020 as he did in 2016 across the board in turn. And if you are careful, I think you have to look at the midterms 2018. Everybody acts like that didn't happen. But that's when Nancy Pelosi got the gavel back. And that's where you saw a record number of women elected. And
Hello, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to ClariT Media. This is Alicia, the founder and executive producer of ClariT Media. Thank you so much for tuning in for the programming. ClariT Media is all about you and your voices. I am here to make sure that your stories are told. We, the people on the ground, in the neighborhoods, throughout our Bay Area communities, have something to say. We are concerned about what's happening in our world around us. That's why I created ClariT Media. It's all about human stories and grassroots solutions. Because out of chaos comes clarity. ClariT Media.